Hey guys, this is Dave with Gizaudio, and this is the Fosi Audio SK02. Now, a few months ago, I reviewed this, the SK01, and I was really surprised by not only its nearly 2.5 watts of power output, but also by just its sound performance for the price, because for $80, it was quite clean and again, quite powerful. And so of course, I was really excited to get my hands on the SK02. So as usual, we'll go over what's included in the box. We'll talk about the specifications and design, and then we'll do a fairly deep dive into the sound. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Included in the box is the SK02. It also includes a 2-in-1 USB cable, so it gives you a Type-C connector on one end and then the option of either a Type-C or Type-A USB connector on the other end. Now, as far as the price, specifications, and design, the SK02 comes in at $100, and it is a DAC amp combination, and on the DAC side it uses an ES9038Q2M DAC chip, which is a very common chip. It's used in a lot of devices like the FIO K3, FIO M11S, Muse Hi-Fi M3 and M4, and many others. It can decode up to PCM 32-bit and DSD 256. The ES9038Q2M is paired with SGM8262 op amps, which provide 1100 milliwatts at 32 ohms out of the 4.4 in high gain, but at 300 ohms, that power drops to 120 milliwatts. Now, out of the 3.5, it's going to give you 280 milliwatts at 32 ohms and 30 milliwatts at 300 ohms. So that's on the inside, but what about the outside? Well, on the front or the face of the device, we have two buttons. The button on the left is the gain button, which of course allows you to switch between high and low gain. The button on the right is labeled mode, but it's the input selector button, and it allows you to switch between the USB input or the optical input. There are two rows of lights. The row on the left has the gain mode indicator lights on the top, and then the lights below that indicate whether or not you're sending it a PCM signal, and it also indicates the PCM frequency. And then you have another row of lights on the right. The top two lights indicate which input you're using, and the lights below indicate whether or not you're in DSD mode and also the DSD sample rate. We then have a large volume wheel that also functions as a play pause button with a single press, and with a double press mutes the device. On the bottom, there are two headphone outputs, a 3.5 single-ended output and a 4.4 millimeter balanced output. And then on the top, we have a Type-C USB audio input that is also the power input. So it does not have a battery like the SK01. It's externally powered. There's an optical input and then a 3.5 millimeter auxiliary output that also doubles as an optical output. As for the design, it's very simple. It feels fairly well built and robust. Its form factor is definitely different from what you typically see with desktop DAC amp combos, and although it is different from what I'm used to, it is functional and it does free up some desktop space as well, which is nice. As far as functionality, I've been using the SK02 quite a bit, and up to this point, I haven't had any issues. The connections have been stable, the buttons have been functioning properly, and my general experience with the device has been quite good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the sound. We'll talk about the SK02's power output first, because that's one of the things that kind of caught my attention. Now, to be honest, I don't know of many other DAC amp combos that can put out this much power at 32 ohms within this price range. I know the FiOK11 is 129, and that gives you 1400 milliwatts of power, which is very, very good. And again, the SK02, we're talking 1100 milliwatts out of the 4.4 balanced output, which is also pretty impressive for $100. And then 280 milliwatts out of the single-ended output isn't bad either. And again, just to remind you, the power output does drop substantially if you plug a 300 ohm headphone into the SK02 like the HD650 or the 350 ohm FT3, and then that power output drops to 120 milliwatts out of the 4.4 and down to 30 milliwatts out of the 3.5 output. So if you do have some higher impedance, harder to drive headphones, you may want to take that into consideration. However, if you don't have any super hard to drive headphones, you should be just fine. And then if you do have a 32 ohm headphone with maybe even a lower sensitivity, you'll still likely be okay, especially if you have a 4.4 balanced cable. And then of course, this has more than enough power to power any IEM out of either output. Speaking of IEMs, another thing I test is background noise. And my go-to IEM is the 2020 version of the Campfire Andromeda because it's very sensitive. And if there is any background noise to be heard, it will definitely pick it up. And the SK02 passed with flying colors. I heard no background noise at all, even in high gain, which is quite impressive. So the general sound presentation of the SK02 is neutral warm. So it's still what I would consider linear, but it does have just a hint of warmth in the low mid-range. So what that's going to do is give instruments and vocals a slightly richer and colored presentation. So it's not going to sound as thin as the SK01. However, it is still about on par with the SK01 as far as its general sound quality. So its detail and just its general technical performance. That being said, I personally prefer the SK02 over the SK01. As for detail levels and its general technical performance, I would say it's a little better than I would have expected at this price. I still don't think it's quite to the levels of the FiOK7 or the SMSL D12. It does come pretty close, but I do still think, again, the K7 and D12 are giving me just a little more detail and a slightly more linear presentation in general. And the same goes for some of my desktop stacks like the E32 and L32. And if I were to try and determine where I feel this lands in terms of its general performance, I would probably have to compare it to something like the FiOK11 and again the SK01, or some of my portable devices, because again, I don't really have very many desktop devices within this price range. I do have other devices, but they are in a higher price bracket. But I do have lots of portable dongle style devices that are closer in price that it might be comparable to, like the FiOK-A5, Q11, Hibby FC4, and maybe even a little better than some of my sub $100 dongles like the Tantrum Space or Space Lite. So in summary, I have to say I've been pretty impressed with a lot of budget desktop stuff that's been coming out lately. And if I look back at some of my recent reviews of devices like the SK01, the FX Audio DS07, FiOK11, or even the FX Audio DR07, which I'm still working on, but almost done, all of these devices perform very well for them being entry-level devices. And the SK02 is no exception. I honestly can't believe I can get this level of sound performance and power output for $100. The design is a little interesting, but it's still very functional. And the bottom line is the value is there. For $100, you get good sound, good power, good features, and good build quality. It's simply an easy recommendation for me. So that concludes my review of the Fosi Audio SK02. If you're new to the Gazaudio channel and you like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. And If you want to go a step further with your support, we also now have a Patreon. I'll make sure and leave a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. Please like this video. Please share this video. I hope you have an awesome day.